Hello, everyone. Hello. Of course, I hit the live button without actually making sure I was ready. And, that's what happens. That's what happens. It's a very odd moment right now. I have a very important ritual dinner. So tonight, I'll explain in a minute. So I, of course, moved up the time, but I just did it because it's been a crazy. I don't know about all of you, but it has been a crazy week. Um, and today is the end of the Apagamental days, and boy, do we feel it. I don't know about all of you, but I feel it so much more. I feel it. I am actually kind of happy that it's the end of the Apagamental period because way too much has gone on in such a short period of time. So, hello, everyone. Welcome back to another session of Plant Consciousness Commentary. I'm Tigria Gardenia. If you're new around here, I just remembered. Look, I am so spazzed out that I am like not. I hit the start button without preparing pretty much anything, and that's what happens. That's what days like this are, and that's okay. So I actually have an intro. I do have an intro. I need to find it because I'm so disorganized. So it's actually been 2 weeks since we've had the last Plant Consciousness commentary. And of course, that means that I'm a little bit like also, I don't know. How is it that in 2 weeks you become completely 100% out of practice? I don't know about all of you, but that's exactly what happens to me. Anyway, to make a long story short, it's been a crazy time. It is the end of the Apagamental days. So if you go to my podcast, Reconnect with Plant Wisdom, you can find out exactly what the Apagamental days, but in a short, the Apagamental days are these days outside of time. They're days that are usually around the time of right at the end of like the 26th of December. And in Egyptian mythology, they lasted 5 days. In our Damanhurian work that we do, we've been able to extend them. These are days outside of time. These are days that are really dense days. They're really amazing days for creating projects with very little resistance, because it's almost like outside forces that could affect the work that you're doing are being held back, and there's an entire mythology around it. On my website, there's various blog articles as well as 2 different podcast episodes where I talk about these days. It's really funny that I'm starting this talking about the Apagamental days because this is kind of a scientific scientific live stream, and here I am talking about something that is very magical in nature, but it is what it is. That is what it's like when you're working with me, and we bring it all in together. So anyways, the Apagamental days in Damanhurian philosophy, we are able to, through a series of conscious events and activities that we carry out, stretch them out, and they end promptly today. For us, they end with a very important ritual called the Ritual of the Form, and it is a ritual dinner that is held. There is the official kind of ritual itself, which is held in the temples of humankind during the winter months and during the summer months out in the Sacred Woods Forest. And then also there's lots of smaller celebrations that are ritually connected back to that main event all around the world. I have, for the first time, was invited to the official event. And during the official event, we work through certain situations. There's always a theme. And so therefore, I guess my expertise was wanted for this particular theme. We will see what it was like. I'm kind of excited. I'm kind of a little nervous. I'm kind of also, oh my God, I have too much stuff to do. But that's okay. I would have been in the ritual dinner anyway, no matter what was going on. So how cool that I get to go experience it with a really great group of people, and I get to work on a very important project for Damanhur. But none of that is why we are here. So that is the reason why I moved everything up half an hour. But that's not the reason why we're here. We're here to continue the work that we're going to do. So if you're new around here, if you don't know anything about Plant Consciousness commentary, I am going to roll the intro, of course, assuming that I know how to do this, because we've already established that I am pretty ignorant about certain things. That's right. I have to do it this way because I have to share the audio. We're going to roll the intro. I'm going to be in the foreground of it, in the background of it, because I don't actually know how to turn myself off. If somebody knows how to turn themselves off when they do this, you let me know, because see, that's not even what I wanted to show you. This is what I wanted to show you. And if I hit the edit button, it lets me edit things, but I don't know if it lets me turn off my video temporarily. So I'm going to be in the corner. I'm going to hit go on this. You're going to be able to see this and then we'll talk after. Welcome to Plant Consciousness Commentary. I'm your host, Tigria Gardenia, nature-inspired mentor, certified life coach, and the founder of the Naturally Conscious Community. Known as a ambassador for plant over a decade, working closely with plants, sharing their practical wisdom to help you embody the elements of life that nourish your evolution. I explore plant neurobiology, cognition, intelligence, humanities, and the birth of critical plant studies, personal evolution. Together, we'll break down the science to understand the mind of plants and how their wisdom helps us reawaken our own plantness, ultimately living an authentic life as a being of nature. I'm back. I was never gone, as you noticed that. Does anybody know how you turn off the video when you're doing a live? Like, I would love to figure that out. I think I need to go back to live stream. I mean, to StreamYard. I used to use it for a while, but I've been testing out different things. To be honest, you get better reach when you use YouTube's native platform. But that being said, it is nicer to have everything kind of set up in a way that makes sense. Okay, so where are we and what are we doing today? And why is our title the kind of title that I put in there? Here's the thing. Over the last 3 weeks, 3 weeks, yeah. Well, it's really been over a period of almost 2 months because I took a break in between, but it has been 3 sessions that we have been going through this. We have been exploring the conversation of denials in plant sentience. Now, let's explain. I'll give you a little bit of a road so far, what it was that we've been doing so that you understand. In 2023, Miguel Segundo-Ortin and Paco Calvo, which are two researchers that have been working extensively, Paco Calvo especially, who is one of the founders of plant neurobiology, and put out a paper in a journal called Animal Sentience, all around the idea of plant sentience, question mark. And their paper was specifically called Between Romanticism and Denial, Their Science. Now, in this paper, they laid out for them extremely clearly, one by one, all the reasons why plant sentience exists. Okay? That was the premise of their paper. Then at the very end, they put out a call. They said, look, we have been going back and forth with all kinds of different scientists from every realm, from the humanities, from the arts, from the hard sciences, all different kinds, in our own kind of discussions. And, somebody puts out a paper here and somebody puts out a paper there. So we're putting out a call and we're asking you to please write your short paper. Most of these are about a page to a page and a half, maybe too long, as opposed to a long study. So they're more of essays or editorials, as they're called. And we want you to go and express why it is that you believe in or not plant science. Please try to be as detailed as possible because the goal of this is to capture all of this information. This is what Calvo and Segundo-Ortin want to do, is capture it all because we believe there is enough evidence to support the claim that plants are sentient. And if there is an overwhelming amount of information, of study, of research that is showing the opposite, we want to be able to go in and understand it all. So they really did write this paper in a very open way, in a way that was an invitation to share your research and your reasons why. And many people responded. There have been a flurry of different papers. Actually, hold on. Let me see. Where is my... Oh, there it is. I somehow hid the actual paper call. So they put out this website. I mean, they put out this this editorial of their own with their research. So they didn't just say, "Hey, we believe in this." They actually called it out and went through it. And you can find that if you're on YouTube, if you go to the playlist for Plant Consciousness and commentary, you will see my commentary on their paper. And then you will see that there are multiple others, which are the ones that came afterwards, which are all the replies. Now, there are, let's see, what is that? 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. There's about 30 replies, okay? And what we're doing is we're going one by one through these 30 replies to try to figure out what the hell is happening. What is it that is the argument? Where are we today? Now, you got to remember, plant consciousness as a concept. Let's not even get to plant consciousness, okay? Because that's even more controversial. Let's go to just the idea of plant intelligence. Is really starts to pick up some momentum in about 2006, so the early 2000s. By the way, I actually went off on a tangent. The wonderful multi-passionate neurodivergent mind of mine went off on a tangent and started to look for what were some of the oldest papers or literature, article, anything out there that would talk about plant intelligence. And I found the 1840s was one of the first sort of like big, let me just put it out there. 1825 was the first conceptual description and discussion about this. There is some hintings in the 1700s. So in the 18th century, there already is some hintings around it. But by the 1820s, there begins to be a voicing that happens into the 1840s. Gustav Fletcher's work, which is really beautiful, all around the idea of kind of like to understand the human soul, you have to understand the plants. And I found all of that literature super amazingly interesting. And then going into, of course, Darwin. And once we get into Darwin, there is an entire flurry of conversations about the idea of plants as somewhat intelligent beings. That being said, intelligence, even just that word, intelligence, is still controversial. It is easier to call a city intelligent, a machine intelligent, artificial intelligence, all before they will call a plant intelligent. And if you go into the second of these conversations, particular these rebuttals that are happening around plant sentience, you will hear my entire diatribe as to why I think so many researchers in particular struggle with the idea of being able to accept plant sentience. I actually think it's a cognitive bias that is very much connected to the idea of your entire world will change, the entire way you do research, just the same as animal cognition has changed the way and the ethical standards by which we do research. Imagine once we start talking about plants. I mean, there are really very few, if none, no ethical standards around the idea of how we do plants. We can grow any plant we want. We can kill any plant we want. We can take any plant we want and move that plant from one place to another. We can do pretty much and manipulate the body of a plant with complete disregard to whether or not the plant is accepting this. And we see this at every single level, right? We see that this is the environmental conversation. We see this when we talk about construction and building materials. We see this when we come to fashion. All the concerns around even ecological concerns are most of the time, I'm not saying always, but most of the time are all centered around the idea of eventual harm that comes to humans because of harm being done to other beings. It is very rarely the idea that maybe fast fashion shouldn't exist because we shouldn't be killing plants off at that rate. Or maybe we shouldn't be building, not because of the carbon, not because of the damage that we do from the perspective of what will grow there again in the future, but maybe just because we shouldn't be pulling plants out of the ground, especially plants that have been there for hundreds of years, just because we feel like it. Those conversations were not there yet. And in some ways, all of this conversation on whether or not we accept that plants are sentient goes to the idea that, oh my goodness, not only do we have to talk about rights, which is another big area that has been growing over the last, in particular, about 10, maybe 15, 10 years, I would say that one. But we have to talk about rights, but we have to talk about ethical standards. And most people are not ready to have that conversation. Just look, that's my opinion. I am allowed to my opinion as well. Okay. So we're going to keep going through these papers. And this next batch where we start, we've gone through about 13 of them, I think. Once we get, and the last few were harsh because they were coming from the world of the neurobiologists but we sort of already knew that they weren't going to want to read it. I skimmed. I haven't read any of these because, I like to read these all with you. I skimmed some of these titles, and this next batch, I'm a little, okay, we're just going to have to go through it. Okay. So we're going to go through it together. We're going to buckle up. We're going to be open-minded because, there has been some interesting arguments. There have been some discussion points, but it's going to be okay. So the last one we went through was called Plant Sentience, the burden of proof. And of course, this is coming from that world that we've talked about, which is plant physiologists and human or animal neurobiologists, who are all talking about the fact that you plant researchers have the burden of proof. It is not enough to just say, hey, what if we start from the perspective that plants are sentient and work backwards from there? It's the idea of either you prove or, shut up or put up kind of thing. That's a really bad way of saying it. Okay. I also want to state very clearly that right now I have some pretty decent light. It's going to start getting dark at some point. I am going to have to play with lights. It's going to take me a minute. So let's just get through the first paper and then see what happens. This next paper is by Damasio Antonio and Damasio Hanna, two people. Either brothers, and it's called "Sensing is a Far Cry from Sentience." Now, this is, I am assuming, I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to, let's get over there. Let's get it here. Okay. Here is our paper. I am going to assume that this is based off of the concept because you have the ability to sense. In other words, you have sensory systems. It does not necessarily mean that you are that you are sentient. So now, as always, we always start with who are the researchers that are doing this? Why do we do this? We do this because it helps a lot to understand where they're coming from when you understand and to understand their motivations, which I am not saying are always a big factor, but cognitive bias exists and different kinds of biases exist. And so it's always useful. See, these are professors of neuroscience, most likely human/animal neuroscience, right? Psychology and philosophies, director of brain and creativity. So these are already people that most likely, I'm not saying that they are, but we can kind of infer that most likely these are people that believe that brains are the central processing system of everything. By the way, speaking of brain, I was reading an article this week, which kind of looked like a win in the world of plants, but disappointed me. And I'm only stating this because we're probably going to get into this discussion, which was, it was something that was published in one of the journals just recently that was talking about how seedlings have a cluster of cells that looks kind of like the same way as brain clusters do. And therefore, that must be more proof that there's intelligence happening and there are things happening. Now, sure, it looks like a win, but do we really need to be comparing plants as to having brains in order to have a win? Can we please just get to accepting that plants do amazing things that are cognitive without brains? Like, I don't know. I'm just tired. I'm tired of having to argue this over and over again. And I'm not even a scientist in that world. I mean, I am, but I'm not. You know what I mean? So, anyways, these are two professors that are in cognitive sciences, it sounds like, at the University of Southern California. And they are working in brain imaging. So let's just start there. All right. So now we know their motivations. Their hypothesis, their paper is called "Sensing is a Far Cry from Sentience." Now, abstract. The hypothesis that plants might be sentient confuses the notion of sentience or consciousness with of sensing. Sentience, consciousness, implies feeling, experience, and subjectivity, something that anybody who does any kind of plant communication knows that plants experience. But because it can't be scientifically tested off of a checkbox, anyway, sorry. Sensing does not. Plants can sense, detect, and even respond appropriately in the absence of any sentient consciousness. Now, Miguel Segundo-Ortin and Paco Calvo wonder if plants are sentient, and although they clearly believe they are, they pose the question cautiously. Yes, because Calvo is very cautious on this topic. They're open to doubt, avoid the preemptory way in which authors who think that all life is sentient often present their views. Their target article is worth reading because of the many findings from the world of plant biology that they competently review. Still, the problem question of plant sentience revolves around a fundamental misunderstanding. Not misunderstanding. They're not cautionary in their words. Misunderstanding of the meaning of the terms such as sentience, consciousness, and sensing. Sentience or consciousness, according to their definitions, concerns the ability to feel and thus experience the state of a specific living organism. The feeling and experience are purely subjective, available only to the experiencer, the self, process, unfolding within that specific organism. Observers can make an informed guess that an organism is conscious based on indirect external signs. As neurologists, we have all been doing it all our lives, but can never observe sentience consciously, directly. Sensing or detecting, on the other hand, is a simpler process, pervasive in living nature and, in all likelihood, a precursor and support for what eventually became sentience or consciousness. In other words, the presence of sentience consciousness in a living organism means that sensing is also present. However, the presence of sensing does not allow us to predict that there is consciousness sentience as well. Physiological precedents and hierarchy need to be observed, i.e., it does not follow that an organism that senses, detects a particular stimulus can also feel or experience anything, right? According to them, it is not a given. Plants lack any structures, and here we get in this, okay? And I'm gonna state the sentence, and then I'm gonna tell you what I think about it. Plants lack any structures or operations capable of plausibly fabricating feelings and enabling experience. Let me explain this sentence to you because I have heard it 1,000 times. This sentence basically says, because we do not see any brain-like, or what we agree are synapse-like structures inside of the physiology of a plant, because we do not see anything that compares directly to the animal brains that we have been studying for thousands of years. Okay, really, a few hundred, but whatever. Because we do not see clusters of cells that look like brain clusters, because we do not see any of the responses, and we do not have a physical expression similar to the idea of how animals express themselves. In other words, eyebrows that give you quizzical looks, eyes that peer at you with a intent behind them, words that spill out of your mouth that express that you have a independent sensing, feeling, experiencing happening in this moment. We believe that plants do not have the capability of doing this because we have no evidence of it that looks like animals. Doesn't matter that it is devoid of the idea, which is what I would like to hear, that says, we don't have a clue as to how plants would be able to sense things and how we would be able to detect whether or not there's an internal world happening in plants, of which Paco Calvo believes in, because he believes that plants are basically shut-in syndromes. So therefore, since we do not look at it, what would it be like if we were to explore the ability of plants to have an external world, to have a sensing, feeling experience with completely different physiology? Of note, plenty of artificial devices are capable of sensing, detecting, and responding, and they are not sentience conscious either. We believe that the majority of living creatures on Earth, plants included, operate at a basic level of sensing, detecting, and responding without ever experiencing anything related to such processes. Sentient, conscious creatures go one step beyond sensing. They come to feel and therefore know what is going on inside their own living organisms. This additional step is not a luxury. On the contrary, it is the most useful operation because it allows a sentient, conscious organism to respond to not to the consciously perceived stimulus. It opens, and this is, I think, where there are not enough people writing about it, the idea that plants actually choose sometimes not to respond to a perceived stimulus in a certain way. I actually think there's ample evidence that I have seen in the literature of behavior of this sort, but I don't think that the scientists yet are calling it out enough for it to be kind of better studied. Let's say it that way. It opens a sentient organism to the possibility of deliberate behavior. Deliberate behaviors are available in humans, obviously, but also, we presume, in numerous species equipped with a nervous system and sentience. We expect all mammals, birds, reptiles, and fish to be sentient conscious, and we venture that so are some insects. Just a venture. We would not extend that to them lightly. You need to work for it. Heck, fish only got recognized recently. The most intriguing of the it's actually SONC target article concerns plant neurobiology. And here come the human animal neurobiologists arguing about the terminology. The term is unfortunate since there is no neuro to talk about in plants. God, I wish Belushka would have written an article for this. I really do wish he would have written an essay, because only he has that wording down so well. But the authors justify the use of the term from the fact that plants can exhibit action potentials and that the action potentials of plants resemble those of animals. They depolarize, repolarize, and hyperpolarize, although they have different resting potentials and different speeds of propagation. SO and seed also remind us that plants respond to general anesthetics by suspending several life management processes, including the defensive petal movements of the Venus flytrap and Mimosa pertica. This has led to an incorrect conclusion that because general anesthesia in humans causes a radical loss of sensing that inevitably entails loss of consciousness, the response to general anesthetics in plants would also signify a loss of consciousness. This assumption is not justified. General anesthetics cause a sweeping disruption of sensing detecting. If the species in question is capable of also generating consciousness, that will be disrupted as well. This is the case in humans. However, we cannot conclude that a species would be capable of sentience based on the fact that its sentience is not present after general anesthetics have blocked sensing. I do get their argument in this point. I mean, I can see the argument that they're making. I can see it. Suppressing sensing in plants tells us nothing about existing and non-existence of yet another level of function based in it. And here's my ignorance. I've actually read the paper on anesthesia, plus I've read some of the other things that Paco Calvo in particular has written about this subject. But I have to admit that I don't know enough about anesthesia to understand if anesthesia blocks all sensing and therefore you don't feel things and then eventually kind of lose consciousness, or does anesthesia block consciousness and therefore, even though my receptors are technically receiving pain, I don't feel it because my overall consciousness? I don't remember. If anybody knows this, please let me know, because I don't remember. I don't remember. Finally, the authors also press the neural resemblance of plants and animals by noting that molecules used by nervous systems of animals can also be found in plants. The examples include, acetylcholine, dopamine, histamine, noradrenaline, serotonin, and GABA. But while these are fascinating facts, it should be clear that nothing that in the world of plants resembles a nervous system. No, and we've already gone through this. Gosh, I want a packet. I want a packet of literature. I want a packet that anybody who's going to respond to this whole conversation needs to read the packet of literature. You need to read it. One of them is the idea that a nervous system is a specific application of a series of functions, and that the plants can have a similar function without the same biology. Because nobody seems to just, and I'm like, we've already had papers that have gone into depth about this. Why are we still with one central and peripheral and circuits, with ganglia and nuclei, and importantly, with definable relationships between the interior of the organism? The situation of organisms with nervous systems is remarkably different from the situation of plants. A clear distinction can be made between the non-neural interior of an organism and the nervous system that is located amidst the non-neural interior. As we have proposed elsewhere, The possibility of sentience consciousness emerges from the non-neural interior of an organism and the nervous system located within that interior. In animals, sentience consciousness consists in animals of a continued valence experience of the state of the interior. As it occurs, the experience then serves as a reference for any events that, that occur in the surround of the organism, and the organism can appreciate perception. The critical term sentience consciousness should be strictly reserved for organisms confirmed or highly likely. And here is the word, it's that highly likely, the fact that because the different, these scientists will not accept it. They'll always see it as not likely. I don't know. I don't know if this kind of paper actually brings any value. I mean, it's the same shit, to be honest, that we hear over and over again. It's the same thing. Okay. So I don't know. Give me some value. That there's no value in that. In my opinion, there's no value in that. So let's just go right on to, I mean, it's not even worth it for me to sit here and try to like argue about that one, because it's so similar to the ones that we've already read that it's ridiculous. I mean, I think that they should all be forced to write something that hasn't been written about before, rather than just continuing to hammer on the same points. Okay, so let's go to the next one. This is Valleverdu Jordi, which is, hey, he's probably Catalan. What if plants compute? I don't even know the direction this one wants to take. Okay, what if plants compute? Hold on. I got it open already. Haha, I'm getting a little bit better at things. I actually have it open. Let's share. Share the window. Share. Okay, so Valleverdu. Oh, we've read something by him before. I don't remember what, but I have read something by him before. Valleverdu is just making sure that I have the right view. Hold on one sec. Review. There you go. Okay, so what compute? Jordi Valleverdu is an academy researcher at UAB, is an expert on cognition and epistemology oriented to fields. So he does emotional modeling, ethics, and art. I already like this guy. I don't know if that's going to be good or not. I have no clue, but I just like the fact that it's a different field. We're not just talking about regular plant neurobiology. I mean, human animal neurobiology or something like that. So this is exciting. I like the idea that there's something different. Okay. Here we go from the philosophy department. Oh, the University Autónoma de Barcelona. I knew he was Catalan. I told you he was Catalan. Anyway, the abstract. The unexpected cognitive capacities of plants suggest the possibility of combining them with advances in computation. It is important to explore such a new field of research despite the incompleteness of the empirical support. So his question is, what if plants compute? Does that tell us anything about consciousness? Let's find out. The new discoveries about the cognitive capacities of plants need to be connected with the contemporary in the power of computation. Do plants themselves compute? Or can they provide mechanisms for computing? By the way, here we're not just talking about computing like a computer. We're talking about whether or not computing is, I take in a series of values and I do something with those values and I render a verdict based on that. Computation in that perspective, I think. Adamatsky et al. Have shown that plants can provide a reliable way to design computational systems. It might be possible to combine them with computation following engineering principles because of their intrinsic mechanistic properties. Adamatsky suggests that using action potentials as multifunctional signals in plants through their vascular networks, so because there is no nervous system, we are now talking about using the vascular network, specifically those of their leaves, can be implemented as a complete set of Boolean functions by selecting locations for stimulating and recording electrodes. Unconventional computing establishes bridges on both sides. One, applying engineering mechanisms to raw biological materials, and two, reverse engineering how such biological systems are built to process complex information. Didn't I say this earlier? If we were to start with the idea that plants are sentient and reverse engineer from there, where would we get? That was my question. Very basic and classic examples of bioinspiration for computational purposes are neural networks, genetic algorithms, neurochips, neuromorphic computing, and swarm intelligence, amongst a long list. On the other side, the recent creation of xenobots based on deep learning analysis of biological data, reservoir computing with plants, and mycelium computing using mushrooms all show that it is possible to implement not only computational, but basic logic and Bell electric circuits with mycelium. I can still recall the surprise and dismissal Hmm. I can still recall the surprise and dismissal occasioned by Paco Calvo's first ideas about plant cognition. After further reading in several fields, my interest converged on minimal cognition and plant cognition. By the way, Paco Calvo's lab is called MINT. It's the minimal cognition because he's like, I am not even ready to say that plants are computing or sentient at the level, because remember, he's cautious. Remember, we read that in the last paper of humans. Like, I don't even want to get there because he doesn't want to argue that shit. He doesn't want to argue it at all. He's like, can we just talk about minimal or basal cognition, right? Like, let's just start with base conditions. He believes empirically within himself. No, empirically is not the right word. He believes within himself that it's more, but he will never say it out loud in a scientific place because he will only talk about things that he believes he can prove. And I understand that. I really do understand that. It's very different in the way that he's doing science to somebody like Mancuso, who's kind of like out there on the cutting edge and who's made himself a name, especially in Italy, by being able to say big phrases that come from a minimal amount of research, but of which then he extrapolates from. Kind of like me in that way. I'm very much like that. But I don't have to worry about grants, and I don't have to worry about, that perspective. And I can rely on non-scientific methods to connect and compute and to converse with plants. As you will see from a future episode of my podcast that's coming out, that is going to be excellent. So good. Anyway, after further reading in several fields, my interest converged on minimal cognition and plant cognition. Now there is the study of artificial cognition and the use of biologically inspired design in new computational systems, such as those created in the past decade in the UWE Bristol Unconventional Computing Laboratory. The phylogenetic perspective of cognitive complexity has revealed mechanisms in minimal cognition systems, such as slime molds, that could be applied to other cognitive systems, such as human one, or to designing for specific purposes as in network design. Minimal cognition may provide a key to understanding complex cognitive systems, natural, mixed, or artificial. Okay. And Maya Verdu, you sort of are like, you're disappointing me. All of that to say what? Okay, it's possible. So it's like, maybe rather than working about cognition, we should think about computation. And if we can prove computation, then from there, cognition is kind of a given. Maybe? I don't know. What do you think about that one? I don't know. It's a really, really good question as to where he's trying to go with that. Hmm. 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 Okay. I think that one was a neutral. So far we've had one against plant cognition, one sort of neutral. Now let's go to the next one. Do plants have the cognitive complexity for sentience? This is by Richard Solé. So let's find out who Richard Solé is. Richard Solé. Solé. Okay, I'm with Michelle. Michelle says, I think he's saying this is the first step. I'm good with that, Michelle, because that kind of follows a little bit Paco Calvo's model. He's like, let's prove minimal cognition, and then from minimal cognition, we will move on to other forms of cognition. But can we just start there? I'm with you on that. I can accept that we should start with minimal cognition. I'm good with it. Okay, so I think that would be a plus. Minimal cognition plus. So we have a nay in today's session, and we have a yay for minimal cognition. Oops. Do plants have the cognitive Now, who is Richard Solé? Richard Solé, or Solé, is a researcher of Complex Systems Lab University of Pompeu Fabra. He does research on evolutionary origins of complexity. I already like this idea. I hope he doesn't just go with the idea that now we know how plant. I hope what he's saying, this is my hope, is that what he will be saying is, let's go back to how we discovered the complexity of humans and let's start with plants and see where we go, including the emergence of language, brain. Okay, so you're giving me, which is funny because he's very, anyway, I'm not going to say that. Okay, abstract. Like other aspects of cognitive potential of plants, this is a controversial issue. Obvious. We didn't know that. It only took us what? This is like paper number 7, actually probably paper number 90 or 100 that I have actually read. Thank you for telling me it's a controversial issue. I don't know why. Anyway, often driven by analogies and seldom supported on solid theoretical grounds. Sentience is understood in cognitive sciences as the capacity. I suggest that because of plants' evolved adaptations to morphological plasticity, rooted in the ground, and ecological constraints, they are unlikely to have the requisite cognitive complexity for sentience. Ricard Soleil, you just made my shit list. Sorry. Like, I had hope for you. Controversial issue ain't gonna happen. Maybe he has something good to say. I'm hoping. Computation and sentience. Are plants intelligent? Kind of to like state obvious. Anyway, do they exhibit anything like the complexity? Folks, okay, I get that the neural networks is how humans and animals do it. But isn't the real question that we should be asking is, do they exhibit anything that inclination that there's an internal self-awareness happening? This is the question. And then the next question after that is, what would that look like? What are all the different ways that a plant's behavior that I can see could express to me, oh, I got something going on under the hood? Diplodenia is trying to tell me that this environment that we're in right now is not compatible to the way that Key wants to grow. I can't figure out what you need in the winter. This is our first winter together. I still haven't been able to figure it out. I'm working. I'm trying to work with you. Give me more information. Anyway, sorry. Can the responses to external signals be interpreted as intentional in any sense? Over the last 2 decades, a heated debate has been growing between supporters and skeptics based on sometimes questionable analogies. What is needed is a rigorous definition of cognitive complexity. Based on what? That's my question. Because if you want it based on human animals, that is not going to work. Segundo-Ortin and Calvo review several aspects of plant cognition, from sensor actuator mechanisms to communication, learning and swarm intelligence, to suggest that plants have cognitive complexity to allow sentience. I suggest instead that fundamental constraints confine plants within the space of simple, non-sentient processes. I am already insulted. I'm insulted. And I will very blatantly okay, I'm not going to disregard the rest of you say, because I am open. There have been points that have been interesting, but just know you've got an uphill battle to convince me. Just as I have an uphill battle to convince you. Anyway, reasoning by analogy dominates the field of plant cognition. How can it not? We still haven't developed the mechanisms to anyway. For example, SONC suggests that since roots can detect and avoid high salinity levels, this morphological avoidance response, one, is comparable to Tomasello's a go, no-go global inhibition in human and non-human animals. But 2, which is usually discussed in the context of human behavior, involves the inhibition of attention to one stimulus to attend and respond to another. Although a similar chain of events occurs in 1 and 2, it is possible to design a simple circuit lacking sentience, i.e., feeling nothing, that can perform this kind of decision. Similar doubts arise when plants are considered as Yeah, but you can't use that logic either, because you could say the same thing that humans don't have sentience because you could design a circuit. The thing is, you're designing the circuit based on the things that we already do. If we wouldn't do these things, including plants, then you wouldn't have the model in order to create a circuit based off of. That logic doesn't work. Anyway, similar doubts arise when plants are considered as communicating systems. Although they have evolved a rich repertoire of volatile chemicals, this is a coevolutionary outcome of their arms races against pathogens and herbivores. This can all be addressed with Shannon's information theory. Ooh, we did a whole paper on that. Gosh, that was a long time ago. I would need to reread all of that to be able to basically understand it. Without the need for a complex communication structure comparable to language. Oh, this is your A, B, and C. Okay. Okay, so there's your circuit. This is your B, this is your C. Okay, we already know all of this. Let's see. The stomata, the leaf patterns. Figure A, complex information process, communication, and computational complexities are likely prerequisites for sentience, awareness, and consciousness. A communication diagram, A, can be defined for a pairwise plant-plant interactions where two plants interact with an environment with available resources. Okay. Yeah, okay, let's read the paper itself. In figure 1A above, Afalo and Bayare describe a plant-plant interaction diagram that would capture the nature of information channeling between two individuals. Despite the apparent similarities between this and a standard communication channel involving a speaker and a hearer, the intrinsic asymmetry of a speaker-hearer communication taking place through a noisy channel is lacking. The channel, resources, and signals are intermingled entities. Plants can listen but can't answer back. We're going to argue on the can't answer back part. They don't answer. Okay, just listening. The dominant information transfer needs to be found in the rich chemical space of shared signals that drive plant-insect relationships. Ultimately, it is ecophysiology and defense, not cognitive complexity, that seems to be driving information-related adaptations in plants. I still don't understand how any of this proves or disproves whether or not plants have a rich internal ecosystem happening. In other words, whether or not they are self-aware. I just don't get how any of this shows self-awareness. And I find it interesting that nobody has tried to create, well, that's not true. People in the plant cognition world have, but it just seems to me that there are so many more research, so many more studies that we could do, so much more understanding that we could do to explore the topic of this rich internal kind of scape that plants may have. I just feel like we're missing the forest for the trees. That's pretty much what I want to say. Positioning plants in the cognitive morphospace, one of the big difficulties in trying to define plant cognition rigorously is their special status within the biosphere. As noted by SO&C, there is a general perception among critics that plants lacking neurons are not expected to display complex responses. Their sessile nature and the access to an energy source that does not require active search have largely conditioned the potential for developing complex sensory and information processing structures. In the examples highlighted by SO&C, such as the responses of insectivorous plants, the Venus flytrap, the stimulation by potential prey, fascinating though they are, we've got a little condescension mixed in there. Just a little condescension. The computational complexity of the mechanism is captured by the simplest transition diagram. The flytrap is described by a set of states. State changes or depends on the presence or absence of a stimuli. Computational process is what we find in obviously non-sentient man-made artifacts such as bending machines. It can be argued that alternative mechanisms of information processing might replace those that are grounded in interconnected digital or threshold-like elements, and that plants are, in fact, one extreme case within the space of cognitive complexity. Yeah, but I think you're mistaking the idea that in that computational complexity, not computation, in the logic circuit that you're created, an external thinking being created the circuit. In other words, you have to program the circuit. The circuit didn't develop on their own. So the sentience is not proven by how the circuit works. The, the, the sentience is proven by the logic required to create the circuit. Or am I missing something? Did I miss something? Because it feels like that would be the actual discussion point, which is once there was nothing and Venus flytrap was getting, Dionea was getting these stimuli and was wasting energy. And then Dionea said, I wonder what I can do to be more efficient. And Dionea started playing around with different things. Well, what if I try this? And what if I try that? And what if I try this? And what if I go with that? And in the end, ended up with a system, which is the system that we have now. Right? Am I missing something, folks? So then designs a very simple logic circuit, which in and of itself, you're right, doesn't prove anything. But doesn't the fact that Dionea created the logic circuit prove it? I am so missing something. Maybe my mind is too simplistic. Maybe my science background is not rich enough for me to see what I think is actually at the heart of all of this. Very, very confused. Very confused. Feels like your argument is wrong here. There are also alternative forms of natural computing, such logic, as illustrated by Physarum, where morphological changes largely define the solutions for natural environmental conditions and for fixed artificially defined boundaries, such as maze. Although social insects are equipped with brains, because it always goes back to brains, collective information processing is mechanical fields that interact with their liquid nature. But in all these cases, two crucial features of solid brains made by interacting units are needed. The first crucial feature is intermediate elements that allow information processing beyond the sensor effect metaphor. In neural systems, it is interneural neurons that play this role, essential for non-trivial computational tasks. This allows integration to be the central part of complex cognition, beyond interacting modules. Only when multiple layers are introduced is there room for non-trivial responses. Yeah, but that's a physiology that is connected to that specific type of organism. Plants have a different physiological Why are we comparing physiology? Okay, just read. I'm just going to read for a second. I'm going to read because I'm getting a little agitated with all this. It's like, it just feels like we're comparing apples to oranges. And then we're saying, well, you have an apple over here and you have an orange over here. Like you have an apple over here and you have a table over here. And therefore, you can't prove the fact that, I don't know, they're both made from natural materials. It's like, what? Like, it's just weird. The second crucial feature is reentrant loops might be a critical requirement for sentience. Is there something we can map onto any of these two crucial topological features? I think the answer so far is no. It is worth noting that some dynamical processes observed in brains, such as critical states, are also present in plants. Oh, you're conceding something. Interesting. But with a totally different functional role. In neural systems, a critical state is known to exist, with brain wave dynamics taking place at the boundary separating ordered and disordered states. By synchronizing different brain areas around a critical state, global integration occurs, while the system responds rapidly to external stimuli. In general, critical states facilitate large-scale optimal integration of information in living systems, from whole brains and bird flocks to single cells. Interestingly, stomata in leaves also seem to respond to external changes through collective near-critical responses that solve an optimal gas exchange problem. Unlike in animals, however, in plants, the dynamics are limited to single leaves with no integration beyond this scale. You see the fact that it's in a single leaf as something that's limitation, where everybody else sees that as a plus? Wait, hold on. I'm reading a comment from Michelle. So we entirely disregard that it's being shown that plants can recognize their own offspring, same species, and will share nutrients through their roots based on preference for their children. Oh yeah, no. None of that counts, Michelle. None of that counts because as all, even researchers cherry pick their responses. Like they don't look at all the literature. That's why I said I go back to what I said before. I think before you can comment on this, I think I want to give you a packet. You need to have a packet, and your packet has certain information that you need to use. And this is the packet of research that you need to read, both for and against. I don't think that it all has to be for research. Ooh, sorry. I just turned on a light because it's starting to get dark out, and I don't know what's going to happen soon. Ooh, excuse me. And I just wanted to be ready. So yeah, I think you need to read this packet, and you need to read the packet before you can comment on anything. And I think he's missing the packet. I think he's missing all of Susan Simard's research. I think he's missing the packet. We need to give him a packet. I think we need to put together the packet, like the essential scientific reading for anybody that would like to enter into the debate on plant consciousness. I think that's what we should do it. We should call it that. We should have it like that. I'm here for it. I'm here for it. Cognitive transitions in aneural systems. To properly address the question of whether, remember, this is a mechanistic person. This is a person that breaks everything down to computation. What was that? What was it? What was the book that we read in the Plant Wisdom book club about this? Biocivilizations. Biocivilizations. This is a person who does not understand biocivilizations. They are breaking everything down to mechanistic science, and then they're saying that because this over here doesn't prove this over there when these two. Yeah, anyway. Anyway, moving on. To properly address the question of whether or not plants are sentient requires serious consideration of new models of evolved cognition that can shed light on the space of what is possible and its constraints. Neural organisms, particularly those equipped with brains, we see our core problem here, have evolved mechanisms for predicting their environments and have thus become more independent of external fluctuations. Plants, in contrast, achieve such control of environmental uncertainty in two powerful ways. I mean, he does give a little bit to the plants, but then one is connected to the architectural network design. Although often used as an argument in favor of neural-like equivalence, the tree-like architecture of vascular and root structures can be fully accounted for using allometric scaling laws. Similarly, optimal designs can be found in leaf venation patterns that display a graph structure including many loops. A high density of loops provides a mechanism to effectively reduce the impact of damage as well as fluctuations in load. By the way, the plants designed all of these structures all by themselves. There was no external programmer that came in and said, "Ooh, I'm going to design a plant." Like, unless you believe in God, which if you do, we're going to have another different discussion. I mean, I don't have any problem with you believing in God, but if you believe that God designed it, then maybe you can say the plants are not sentient. But if the plants had to design these things themselves, isn't the design in and of itself show sentience? Am I loopy? I think I'm loopy. Am I speaking out of turn? Like, are the things I'm saying make no sense? I really want to know. If you think that what I'm saying makes no sense whatsoever, please let me know. I want to hear it. I want to hear it. I am not saying I'm perfect or I am completely right. I am just asking you whether or not I am making sense. In both cases, theoretical models explain the observable network patterns without any reference to information. Secondly, plants also adjust their physiology to minimize metabolic disturbance and through a close coupling between developmental changes. The latter results from active monitoring of their physical context, hence the importance of embodied information processing. This is the key to plants' potential to anticipate future changes in resource availability. Summary. Okay, we got to their summary. We got to his summary. The claim that there is plant sentience or awareness is extraordinary and thus requires extraordinary evidence. Why? 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 Who says that it's extraordinary? What if it's average and it's normal and it is just the way things are, and therefore it only requires average evidence? I am about to touch a political topic that I don't want to touch, but I do want to touch. I am not getting into politics. I'm not getting into politics, and I'm not getting into politics. But this is the exact same discussion that says, if a woman wants to be a lawyer, like in the 1700s or 1800s, then she needed to, because stating that a woman is capable of law is extraordinary, she needs extraordinary evidence beyond what we white males have shown in order to prove that she can be a lawyer. So the regular bar and the regular law classes that I, as a white man, took do not count for the woman, because it would be extraordinary to think that a woman isn't that completely the opposite logic? Like, wouldn't the logic here instead be the complete opposite, which is like, you know, because plants are so dumb, therefore, really, we have to see something in order to believe that they're intelligent. I mean, or even just the same standard, maybe just the same standard. Maybe. The remarkable modularity of their architecture makes plants stable under fluctuations and damage. And who designed that architecture? The plants. And didn't they have to do so many different kinds of calculations and understandings and experimentations to get there? Yes. They achieve the stability by massive redundancy under a very distinct set of mechanisms. This is an interesting twist on John von Neumann's question about how to build a machine that, like the brain, works reliably, but despite being made of unreliable parts. Plants do it too, but they are far from brains. Plants don't want to be brains. Plants don't need to be brains. Plants don't need to be brains. Perhaps being autotropic sessile agents, in other words, you are basically saying that the thing that you rely on to make you, because, I can't create my own food, I have to rely on plants. But that has to be, this is the whole, you remember that we did this with the feminist plants, and I kind of wish now to go back to that paper. If we didn't have so many other papers, I would go back to that paper because it merits reading it again, which is this idea and this whole concept that we're going through, even with this Garden of Eden rewrite that we're doing in plant inspired masterclasses, which you should definitely come and check out because it's amazing. Is this concept that we keep forgetting that all human beings pass through a woman. Therefore, isn't it really actually doing a disservice to you yourself to call women kind of dumb? Like, doesn't that actually hurt you because you came from a woman? And this is the same concept. Like, we all pass from plant. Doesn't yeah, I don't understand. Sorry, I'm turning on more lights because it's getting darker and darker outside. And it's going to get like darker and darker in here. That's just what's going to happen. Okay, I'm going to try to get finished through this paper because I thought I am. To substantiate this, however, a new generation of plant evolution models will need to be developed, along with comparative studies of complexity that properly define complex cognition and move beyond analogy. If there are distinct kinds of cognition associated with distinct evolutionary paths to cognitive complexity, major transitions might emerge once certain thresholds of innovations are achieved. A comparative analysis across plants and other kinds of agents might prove new insights beyond standard metaphor. Well, that wasn't against, right? I mean, he doesn't want anything to do with this. Ricard Soleil. It doesn't want anything to do with it. No intelligence there. Okay. So we have sensing is a far cry from home against, right? Where are we? Yeah. Sensing is a far cry from sentience against. What if plants compute? Meh. Do plants have the cognitive complexity for sentience? No. And our next one is not going to be any better, folks. I fear we are heading down a path of we do not want to give plants any kind of idea that our food is sentient. We just don't. We don't. We don't. So let's get into the next one, which is by Tom Bennett. Oh, sorry. Cognition. Where are we? Cognition is not evidence of sentience. At least he states it straight up in the title. We don't even have to, we're reading it because we want to know why he thinks it, but seriously, nah. So it is an associate professor of plant signaling and development at the University of Leeds. He studies how plants detect their environment, process and integrate this information, and use it to modulate their growth and development. In other words, he likes to chop up plants. I am a plant chopper-upper, and I do what I want from that. All right, let's see what Mr. I'm assuming Professor Bennett has to say. Oh, the ability. This is a hard one today, folks. This is like a super hard one today. And it's like there's just a lot going on here, and it's hard. Hold on one second. I'm just getting a. Okay. All righty. Sorry, I told you I was going to this ritual dinner, and I have somebody who's picking me up, and he was letting me know at what time he was picking me up. Okay. Ooh, we can do this. The ability of plants to detect their environment, including other organisms within that environment, is unquestioned. True. Okay. The ability of plants to differentially process, integrate, and respond to complex combinations of environmental information could perhaps be described as cognition. But no amount of evidence for cognitive abilities in plants equates to evidence for plant sentience. He's not mincing his words, is he? Nor is plant sentience required to understand or interpret the behavior of plants in their environment. Never, no can do, will not be accepted. Move on. Nothing to see here, folks. There is no sentience. Did you get that? Did you get it? Make sure you get it. Let's find out why. 1, plant sentience. What? Even among plant scientists, there has long been a tendency to view plants as rather passive actors in their environment, merely reacting to stresses through hardwired response mechanisms. This is perhaps best illustrated by classical physiological models in which changes in plant growth are explained as a response to starvation. However, as summarized by SO&C, a wealth of studies over the last 2 decades have shown that plants can change their growth and physiology proactively in response to environmental information. They can anticipate future events, such as starvation, by monitoring the environment and adjusting their behavior to avoid stress altogether or to deal with it as effectively as possible. One can describe this ability as cognition, as SO&C do, but the term is controversial here. Thank you for calling out something we just didn't know. We had no idea. Moi? Controversial? No. As highlighted by both Tenkate and Mallet, because he's a Mallet et al. Fan, which is where Lincoln Tice is too, in their commentaries. The proactive processes might still be hardwired responses to predictive cues in the environment rather than direct responses to stressful stimuli. In other words, somehow the plant with no mechanism for sentience or intelligence in some cases, was able to monitor the environment, recognize that there are these cues, somehow encode those cues in their body, then be able to, with constantly changing environment, because global warming, constantly know how to adapt to those cues. But there is no intelligence and sentience. Okay. Um, However, we do not yet fully understand plant information processing. Explain to me how that line does not directly contradict your earlier statement of no amount of evidence will prove plant sentience. Tipped, tipped, tipped. The plant bodies are pseudo-colonial with no central processor. Yay! And each organ processes information locally. In such distributed computing systems, there could certainly be scope for something akin to cognition to arise as an emergent whole system property of the hardwired responses of individual organs to the environment. Okay, so now you're saying that it is possible? I am confused. You just said it wasn't possible, but now you're saying that it is? Did I miss something, folks? The plant neurobiology debate. The recent evidence for plants as proactive agents undergoing complex interactions with their environment, including with other organisms, has led to vigorous and rather polarized debate among plant scientists. There are some very active proponents of plant neurobiology and, by extension, plant intelligence, and a large number of plant scientists who instinctively and automatically react against such claims. Yes, there are. This is evident in the commentaries evoked by the target articles of SONC, who are also strong proponents of plant neurobiology. For the record, I am very much on the fence. That is not what you said at the very beginning. Dude, rewrite your abstract then, because your abstract is not an on the fence abstract. I just want that on the record. Regarding this debate, thank you for clarifying it for us because we didn't know. I certainly recognize the potential for plants to have some form of complex information processing akin to cognition, but I do not think current evidence allows any firm conclusions to be drawn. For me, there is enough fascination in the understanding of the incredible ability of plants to adapt proactively to the environment. It does not matter to me whether this counts as cognition or not. Well, it matters to some of us. This matters. Cognition is not evidence for sentience. SONC summarized current evidence for plant cognition as well as for electrophysiological signaling that could act like a nervous system of animals. I like that. That phrasing, I'm with you. Could act. These capabilities are then used to argue that plants could be sentient, i.e., able to feel sensations rather than just respond to stimuli. I disagree with the arguments advanced by SONC counts. So you're on the fence, but you disagree with them. Fair. Okay, I'm starting to understand you. First, as well summarized by Goodfried's commentary, this is largely an empty debate about a cultural construct. The idea of sentience is hard enough to define in humans, let alone animals, and certainly impossible in the context of plants, which is why some of us who are trying to be reasonable are not asking you to say plants are sentient. They're asking you to stop saying plants are not sentient. Do you see the distinction? Can we just start there? Going back to, as Michelle had talked about, and how even Paco Calvo has talked about, and how many others have, can we just talk about minimal intelligence and like basal cognition? Like we're talking about the base. Can we just start there? Can we just stop saying that plants are not conscious? And can we just say, we don't know? I think if we were to just get there at the end of this big debate, I would be happy. I would be happy. I think that that's the best solution for us all. But even if we could define what plant sentience would amount to, we can never know whether plants have it. I don't agree with the word never there. I would just say we don't know today. Because I keep hoping that there will be scientists who know how to build scientific methods who will sit down, kind of like what Monica Galeano intended to do, and will work with a plan to design research studies that will show. I do believe that this is going to happen. I believe at some point, some more advanced scientist who has the ability and the tenure to do this will get there. I really do believe that. My second objection relates to the line of argument advanced by SO and C. They seem to rely on very weak reasoning, which essentially amounts to because X exists, we cannot rule out that Y exists. Yes, I'm okay with that. I am okay with that. I'm okay with that. SO and C do not present any evidence for the existence of plant sentience per se, only speculation based on incompletely understood phenomena. E.g., it is possible that anesthetics not only disrupt plant behavior, but shut down plant sentience or awareness altogether. SO and C rely on the argument that because plants may have cognitive abilities that are unanticipated, we cannot rule out that they are also sentient. Thus, since plants turn out to exhibit many of the cognitive abilities formerly assumed to be exclusive to animals, there's no reason to assume that they are incapable of sentience too. I am totally on board with this sentence. But cognition would not be positive evidence for plant sentience in itself. And indeed, no amount of evidence for plant cognition would ever be evidence for sentience. Why? He doesn't state and explain why. I want to know his understanding of why no amount of evidence for plant sentience in itself is indeed no amount of evidence for. So he's basically saying that there is no way for you to draw a line from cognition to sentience. Just because I am a cognitive being does not automatically say that I am a sentient being. But even with a preponderance of evidence of cognition, that still would not prove sentience. This I want to understand more. I want to understand the fundamental difference in your mind between cognition and sentience. That would be useful. In this sense, I concur with Struick that SO and C do not link cognition to sentience in a scientifically principled or rigorous way. Yes, but you're unlinking it without any kind of scientifically principled or rigorous way. You're not leaving space for it. You're saying no amount. Your own phrasing goes against what you're saying. Huh? Whereas I think that proves that some people are not sentient. I agree with you, Michelle. We definitely have some people around us right now that are not sentient. I think so. I think if we start to say that sentience is not an automatic because we can't give it to plants, I think that we should just then admit that we can't give it automatically to humans either. Where does that take us? Whereas I join the other commentators in recognizing the stimulating contribution of SO and C and the vigorous debate that it provokes, my personal belief is that discussions about plant sentience are an unnecessary distraction from understanding the amazing ability of plants to adapt to their environment. We should aim to understand plants on their own merits by chopping them up and doing whatever the hell we want with their bodies because they're not sentient and therefore they have no rights and no ability to tell us what it is that they want. Sorry, that was my commentary stuck in there. That was mine. Rather than trying to fit them into zoomorphic frameworks. All righty. I am going to stop this one. Okay. He started off with a, then he went, maybe, then he went, no. So we're not doing well, folks. I told you that this batch, just from the titles, were like telling me that this was not going to be pretty. This was not going to be pretty. Okay. So we have started with sensing is a far cry from sentience. We went through what if plants compute. We then passed through, do plants have the cognitive complexity for sentience? We're still mostly in nays. We have a little bit of a maybe, nobody for. Cognition is not evidence of sentience. Definite no, and never will be according to him. And now we're going to Jonathan Birch, who is telling us that disentangling sentience from developmental plasticity. I have a feeling that this is going to be another nay, folks. This is going to be another nay. Is there a yay in here somewhere just from the titles? Let's see. Complex floral behavior of an angiosperm family, maybe. I'm reading the titles off. Plant Sentience, timescale matters. Probably not. Maybe. Associative learning, unmet criterion for plant sentient. That's probably a no. All right, let's move on from where we are because we don't want to get lost. Okay. Let me share. Let's go to the next one. Well, while we're going, remember all the YouTubey stuff? You can like, you can share, you can give it a little thumbs up, you can subscribe, you can tell other people to come and like and subscribe. It would be really cool. It would really help us get the word out there. Help me and the plants, because that's really the us that we're talking about here. We're talking about us and the plants. Okay, Jonathan Birch, disentangling sentience from developmental plasticity. What does Jonathan do? Oh, hold on. Jonathan, what do you do for a living? What do you do? Jonathan is a professor. Is the principal investigator on the Foundations of an Animal Sentience project. Okay, now you might remember, I'm gonna take that off for a second. You might remember that time ago, I should really turn the lights on back there. I'll do it in a second. Give me a second. Time ago, we did a commentary. I did commentary. We followed along because, all of you are part of it too. Without you, please, this wouldn't work. We did commentary on animal sentient it was a report by the Plant Initiative, which is a project, an academic project all around plant advocacy. We did this comment. They were saying how the animal rights movement is actually not the best movement to follow. I have a feeling that this is going to be a paper that's going to be very similar to that in model. Like, animal rights movement is not going to be the one that helps us here. So we shall see what happens. Okay, folks, I don't know how to turn my video off for a second, so I need your support while I I'm going to just read through the abstract for a second while I do something. Look, I'm going to do this for 10 seconds while I go do something. Bear with me. I am a professional. That is so not true. Okay. It was getting really dark in here. Look at that. I have lights. Thank you for your patience. Okay. I am a professional. You can tell I am not a professional YouTuber. I'm not a professional live streamer. I play one on TV, or I play one in the naturally conscious community. So thank you for your patience. All right, let's get into Jonathan Birch's. We have an abstract that reads, this is going to be so curious because he's talking about disentangling sentience from developmental plasticity. Is this something that you had to deal with animals? Okay. Plants, like animals, display remarkable mental plasticity, inviting the metaphorical use of terms like decision and choice. In the animal case, this is not taken to be evidence of sentience because sentience is a complex product of development, not something that guides it. We should apply the same standards when evaluating the evidence in plants. It is hard to overstate the contrast with the case of invertebrates such as octopuses. I don't know. I know some people use, how many of you use octopuses versus octopi? I'm so curious. Michelle, I am not reading what you just wrote in the quote. In the comments, but I do have to agree that from the photo, it gives that vibe. I am not going to say that because I do not want, anything of YouTube to think that that's where I'm going, but I get the vibe. Thank you. We should apply the same standards when evaluating the evidence in plants. It is hard to overstate the contrast with the case of invertebrates such as octopi, where pain markers that were originally developed for use in mammals have been clearly demonstrated and plausible neural substrates for sentience have been identified. No, I get you. I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying. I got it, Michelle. Next, sorry. All right. SONC have a modest aim to convince us that the possibility of plant sentience is worth exploring scientifically. Although they grant the more detailed knowledge of plant behaviors is needed before we can make any confident claims about whether they are sentient, they caution against concluding that plants are not sentient because they lack brains. This is what I'm trying to say. This goes back to the previous paper. Stop saying it's not possible and let's just say we haven't proven it yet. I am okay with you saying we have not proven it yet. Like, I see what your argument is saying. I can see your this, and this. I don't concede that, and that. We can argue about that all the time. But please just stop saying it's impossible because that goes against it goes against the fundamental way that we think about science. It just doesn't make sense. It is hard to tell whether they see the evidence they cite as raising the probability of sentience. In my view, it does not. I think, because of course, I work on an animal sentience project, therefore, I only want to talk about animal sentience. Don't take away from my animal sentience. I think it is fair to be initially very skeptical of the idea of plant sentience. Please tell me why. I love when they say these random sentences like that, but then they give nothing. Can you please tell me why? Why? Why is it fair to be so skeptical? I'm waiting. I'm waiting. Evidence obtained so far has not given us grounds to revise the probability upwards, but careful attempts to obtain new evidence are welcome. Well, at least he opened a door somewhere, cracked it open just a wee bit. Let's get a little air in here. I hope that SONC in their responses can state whether they agree. If they disagree, I hope they can state which parts they disagree with. A point of agreement, there is abundant evidence of remarkable developmental plasticity in plants. We can all agree with that. Watching a bean shoot develop its time lapse is fascinating and spectacular. Likewise, there is remarkable developmental plasticity in animals, and because of course, we can't say plants are cool without saying animals are cool too. Okay, remember, Michelle, I'm starting to understand your comment even more. Even more. Look how great that woman is. She is great, but also look how great this man is. Likewise, there is remarkable development plasticity in animals, and watching an animal embryo develop in time lapse is fascinating and spectacular. Oh, we were talking about plants? No, let's talk about animals. It is an astonishing feat of chemical and bioelectric signaling, coordination, and differential gene expression. It is very natural to talk metaphorically of an animal or plant making decisions or choices as it develops. In the animal case, however, it is generally accepted that developmental plasticity is not evidence of sentience. If a review of evidence of sentience is an animal taxon, if a review of evidence of sentience in an animal taxon had presented copious evidence of developmental plasticity, the commentaries would have rightly dismissed this evidence as irrelevant. Discovering that animals of a given clade display impressive plasticity does not raise the possibility that they are does not raise the probability that they are sentient. I would pick the bear every single time, Michelle. Every time. This is because in the animal case, we know that sentience is a product of development, not something that guides it. Granted, humans have created rare exceptions. We can consciously take drugs such as testosterone that will affect our developmental trajectory. But these are exceptions that prove the rule, as it were, because it takes all of our technological ingenuity to exert the tiniest degree of influence. Animal development is not normally guided by conscious choice. So the path to seeing plasticity as evidence of sentience requires us to set aside one of the most basic, most fundamental pieces of common ground in animal sentience research. Being asked to take seriously the possibility that, while sentience has no role in guiding development in animals, sentience in plants does have this role. I'm thinking about this because I think the question is slightly different, and bear with me for a second. I don't know enough about this, so I could be wrong. The question was in developing markers and understanding of sentience in animals, did you pass through looking at developmental plasticity for a while because you did not have other markers, and therefore those helped you stepping stone before you could set them aside and recognize that you needed different markers? The question is that, does it make sense for us to look at certain things in plants today that maybe is irrelevant for the animal conversation because of the physiology, because we don't understand the physiology of plants enough and what is a rich internal landscape for plants, and therefore let's look at this thing to see where it takes us. So it's not a question of does this prove sentience, but can this be a stepping stone to help us understand what markers we need to develop in order to define sentience? Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Because I think that that's really the question. It is not easy to get a science going when it is founded on such an extraordinary speculation. Suppose I were to make an analogous speculation concerning animals. That is, imagine I propose that in animals, developmental plasticity should be taken as evidence of a second, mysterious, hitherto unnoticed form of sentience, one that requires no neural basis, which is possible. Hence why panpsychism is a thought process here. And is already at work early in embryonic development before central nervous system has developed. We would call it the sense of the divine in Damanhurian nomenclature and spiritual physics, but I don't think science is ready yet to study the sense of the divine. So, too speculative? I like that he asked the question. Yes, I do think it's too speculative for some people, but for others, it's not. People entertaining the idea of plant sentience should feel pressured towards consistency here. If you find it just too much to speculate about this second form of sentience guiding the development of embryos, consistency suggests you should also regard the parallel speculation about plants as too much. All right, pass the test. What is the difference with the case of invertebrates? Some may say, isn't that also a research program funded on speculation? You are speculating that a capacity that involves the neocortex in mammals can also exist without the neocortex. Why is that any different? I see two major differences. One is that we can directly apply experimental approaches used to assess pain in mammals, such as conditioned place preference test, and observe behavior that, if the animal were a mammal, these tests would clearly indicate pain. When octopi scrape at the site of noxious stimuli with their beak, tend the area with their other arms, become adverse to a chamber where they have experienced the stimulus's effect, and come to prefer a chamber where they experience the effects of localized anesthetic, it becomes very difficult, indeed reckless, to confidently dismiss the possibility of pain. This leads to a challenge for plant sentience researchers. If you can demonstrate conditioned place preference akin to that seen in octopi, many of us will have our confidence shaken. And I think that thank you for this, because I think that this is what I was talking about in the fact that our problem is the experimental approach. Even Monica Galliano's experiments were trying to use a zoocentric model and apply it with a plant model. So, she was going after Pavlov's dog. She was a Pavlovian response. She was going after other pieces, which is all great. I think it opened a lot of doors. I think it got us talking on a series of subjects. I do think that it is important. But I think at this point, we need to go in a slightly different direction. We need to work on the concept of what would the equivalent but yet plant-centric research look like? In other words, what demonstrates plants' conditioned responses? And this is a slippery slope. Let me just say this. This is a slippery slope because part of the reason that people like me, for example, love working with plants is to get away from human conditioning. And yet we are saying that to prove sentience, you must prove conditioning. And this is where the difficulty in not having a standard language that we understand, where a plant can't just say, hey, I experienced this, and I know that for you, human, that would have meant doing X, Y, and Z as a conditioned response, but I don't want to act in that same way, and I can just recognize it and I can deal with it in a different way. Obviously, a plant can't say all that to the majority of people. I do say that the plant will talk in that way to some people. But so the question then becomes, what does a conditioned response that we don't want to believe plants have conditioned response actually look like? You see the difficulty? The experimental modeling here is really the fundamental core problem. It's the elephant in the room that nobody's talking about. We don't know how to design experiments, neither cognitive experiments nor physiological experiments that actually prove the things we want to prove. This is really the core of where we are, right? We don't know. We don't know, right? We don't know. Like Michelle just said, right? Trimming leaves and branches may be akin to trimming fingernails or hair. We don't know. We assume. We don't assume. We assume that when we prune a plant, it means something because a plant can deal with things. But we do also know that plants don't grow in certain directions when you prune over a long period of time, hence a bonsai. Has anybody ever thought that the bonsai's staying small is actually not developmental plasticity, but it is instead a response to being trimmed and pruned? Maybe it's a pain response. Maybe the pain response from the bonsai says, don't grow too big because then will come the pain of the clippers. So therefore, stay small and they won't chop you as much. We don't know that. We have no way of knowing that. And our experimental models don't, when we have people like, what was this guy's name? Hold on. Where'd he go? The one that, hold on, I'm looking for his name. What was his name? Birch? Was that his name? Tom Bennett, excuse me. When you have people like Tom Bennett telling you it's not possible, then you don't even design. So I think in some ways, as much as I don't necessarily agree with all of his thinking, I do appreciate that, that this person, which of course I already forgot his name. Isn't that terrible? I'm so bad. This is Birch, excuse me. Jonathan Birch is telling us that we don't have the experimental approaches necessary. And maybe one of the papers that's missing here is the fact of, could this not be a case of XYZ, all the other topics we're talking about, but instead the fact that our experimental models are not accurate? Look, man, as a person who had to design some models connected to the Music of the Plants devices, I can say it's hard. It's hard. When I was designing the research study into the effects of plant music on human health, obviously this is focused on the human side of it, but the permeations in order to try to prove whether or not it was the plant music versus the plant versus no response at all, what are the different controls, is hard. Because if the plant is in the room, but the plant is not making music, is the plant the one that's healing the person? Or is it not the placebo music that we created? If the plant is in the room and the plant is making music and the person is having a healing effect, is it the plant or is it the music that the plant is making? Should the plant sit in the room with a person for half an hour? Then we ask the plant to design music. Then the plant makes music and we record the music for the human being. Then we play that music for the human being without the presence of the plant. Does that isolate us from the effect of the actual plant? Would that even work if the plant is not near live with the person and dealing with the person at the time? Do you see why my head almost exploded designing this? It was so hard, so hard. So where's the paper? Where is the editorial that talks about, folks, maybe the problem here isn't all the crap that you're talking about, but the fact that we don't know how to design a study to actually test any of this stuff. I don't know. I'm going to go with that. It's a possibility. Okay. It's a possibility. Okay. Where were we? Oh, this is the pain, the pain, the pain, the pain we were talking about. Okay, yeah. The second big difference is that we know that in cephalopod mollusks, decapod crustaceans, and insects, there are brain, it always goes back to brain. There are brain mechanisms functionally similar to those of vertebrate midbrain. Therefore, we can compare the two. That's, I think, the statement he's missing. It is reasonable, if unorthodox, to theorize, based on the mammalian evidence, that these mechanisms may be minimally sufficient for sentience in mammals. So, a potential neural substrate for sentience in invertebrates has been identified. In other words, we know that there's something similar to what animals experience, so therefore we can kind of extend that to believe that there is some form of sentience in there because the mechanisms, the physiological mechanisms are similar. So a potential neural substrate for sentience in invertebrates has been identified, but there is no such mechanisms in plants. No brain, no brainstem, no midbrain, and nothing analogous to these. Again, there is an implicit challenge. Agreed, though, with the word challenge. For plant sentience, researchers show that the conditions described by Merker and Panskip are satisfied by plants. One of the pitfalls of speculation about plant sentience is that it can lead to some commentators, would that be me, to draw false equivalences between plants and invertebrates. But the idea of such an equivalence does not survive a close encounter with the evidence from octopi, decapod crustaceans, and insects. Yeah, I mean, I still goes back to the experimental research thing that I was saying. I just don't think we have it. We have I think we're spending all this time because we think it's a bootstrap to go from animal sentience to plant sentience. And I think we need to think about this completely differently. I think we just need a completely different model. I think we need a completely different model, a different way of looking at it, a different approach. Different. I don't think this works. Okay, I don't have that much time left, and I want to make sure that, where am I? Let me see. I had stopped here originally. Let me see how long. Let me find the next paper because I hadn't even opened it because I wasn't sure. It's called Complex Floral Behavior. There it is. Let's see how long it is. If it's short, I will go through it. If it is, oh, it's super short. Like super short. Okay. Super short. So I'm going to go for it. Because I got about 15 minutes and then I'll wrap things up with where we are. We still have at least one more session to go of this. I do find, I have to say, I was a little nervous when I read the few titles. Oops, crud. Sorry. That was not where I expected to be. I was a little bit nervous that we would have, like, it would just be a ranty face on my side. But I gotta say, that last one, while I don't necessarily agree with all of his, I don't necessarily agree with everything that his conclusions, I do find him pretty interesting because I think he opened up that conversation without inadvertently saying it and not stating it specifically, that says we shouldn't, basically what he was saying is, animal sentience across multiple taxa or different species has been predicated on the idea that there are we start with humans who have brains, and they have brains that have all these other structures and midbrains and cerebral cortex and blah, 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 blah. And then we look for all of that in other species. And then that gives us a basis to say, ooh, sentience is possible. Then let's go and experiment from there. Plants have none of that. Therefore, we should start from a completely different place. And I think that we should stop looking at animal neurobiologists to give us any answers at all, because they can't. We should stop doing comparisons to animals and we should start from scratch. Okay. This is by Moritz Mittelbach, which is a botanist. So studies the systematics and taxonomy of neotropical Loazaceae. It's an intriguing flower ecology and complex plant pollinator interaction. So this is this is why do you haven't give me that for Thilo? Oh, because it was written by two people, excuse me. Thilo Henning, who is that person, and then there's Moritz Mittelbach, which is an ecologist with the Berlin Senate Department for the Environment, studies the interactions of plant, fungi, and insects. All right. This looked like a super short, so let's see where we go. Okay. SO and C provide a comprehensive overview of the many aspects of plant behavior examined to date. In our view, multiple lines of evidence make it difficult to deny plant sentience. We've got a yay. We add further evidence to support the conclusion that plants are sentient organisms. As in animals, the behavior of plants can be seen and studied as an evolutionary trait, subject to and consequence of increasing complexity and interactions of plants within their environment. See, these folks are not going based on the biological comparisons and evaluations or similarities to other sentient, currently accepted sentient being. Yeah, way to end on a high note, Chuggery. So our example is the evolution of floral behavior in Loazaceae, where complex patterns of stamen movement have co-evolved in interaction with specialized pollinators. So saying that coevolution requires a relationship, and a relationship then implies sentience. I am good with that. The evidence, nicely summarized in the target article by SO and C, is sufficient for us. Plants are anything but passive organisms, functioning apathetically, steered by automatisms. We need to set aside the human exceptionalism and zoocentrism of research on sentience and acknowledge that plants make complex decisions, interact with many different organisms, and move at their own speed. Shouldn't sentience be the null hypothesis with all living organisms? These are my folks. These are my folks. And what does it take? Ecology and deep observation of the interaction with beings in order to get there. About fungi, Hathaway puts it thus: various measures of the world accepted as scientific standards are shaped by the specific anatomy of the human body, and in particular, our species-specific senses. Do you know that most of the medicine that we take as women was actually only studied on men? Like, this shows us that we don't just have human exceptionalism. We really narrow it down to a type. In any case, the target article cites one of our studies as evidence of anticipatory behavior in the context of pollination in flowering plants. This can be interpreted as an expression of underlying sentient capabilities. The mostly Andean Loazaceae have developed a complex reward and pollen partitioning system that is actively adjusted to a principal pollinator taxon and its visit intervals. We were able to show that these plants learn from previous visits to alter their pollen presentation by adjusting stamen movements to learned visit frequency. As Mallet and al. Note in their commentary, this system offers promise as a model for investigating plant learning and can be considered anticipatory learning, which is thought to indicate sentience. See, we need a different approach that's not dissecting, but that is based on other applications for beings that we do not yet understand. An earlier study of the same plant family sheds light on the evolution of plant behavior. In many animal groups, behavioral diversity is used to distinguish and describe animal species and to explain how taxa are derived in certain lineages. In contrast, in plants, only abiotic traits, such as distribution and soil preference, are typically used to support and refine taxon delimitation and to determine the systematics of certain groups. For the Loazaceae, we have shown how the diversity in floral behavior observed across about 50 different species is expressed in a complex interaction between the plants and their pollinators that reflect the evolutionary history of this plant family. This behavior takes the form of staggered, active presentation of pollen through thigmonastic, which is based on thigmotropic movements of the stamen. The complexity of this floral behavior gradually increases in the derivation of single lineages. In animal evolution, the gradual refinement and expansion of behavioral repertoire is frequently used as a basis for deriving taxa. Our study shows that the earliest lineages of Loasaceae cannot yet adjust the way they present their pollen in response to the behavior of pollinator. Okay? The earliest lineages, this means that there was a time when the bear, sorry, I just looked at the comments and I saw the bear. Oh my God. Thank you. You had to be here. So go back. If you just got here and you just saw that phrase and you don't know what it means, go back because we talk about it previous. I mean, the bear as a general comment, but I'm just saying the way we just applied it. Anyway, our study shows that the earliest lineages, so this means that this is an evolutionary trait. This shows that there is consciousness of what is going on, and therefore I evolved something new because of it. The capacity seems to be a novel trait in the family's evolutionary history. The patterns of movements show a gradual increase in complexity and accuracy in the younger lineages. It is difficult, just as it is in the evolution of animals, to pinpoint where this behavior can be considered sentient. There is, however, no principled distinction between the two realms with respect to this difficulty. SO&C state that plants have evolved their own means of behaving adaptively through phenotypic plasticity instead of locomotion, as is the case of animals. Our study reveals that there is not only phenotypic plasticity in plants, but also behavioral plasticity. The behavior consists of controlled stamen movements. Hence, Loasaceae have evolved a way to behave adaptively through locomotion, through motion with parts of their body. So they're basically saying that you can use the idea of certain aspects of locomotion to prove that there is sentience, that there is response, and that there is interaction. I think the difference is that somebody, I can't remember which one of these papers said it right now. I think it was one of the papers that stated the fact that plants act, but they don't respond. In other words, in their minds, the way that plant communication happens is not a two-way dialogue because, of course, different than human beings and others where it's like I move and then you move and you move and then I move, or I speak and you respond, or I do this and you do that. And it's very easy to see this. When you're looking at plants, a plant might send a chemical signature, then it has to pass through who knows what. And I think this is why there's a paper about time scale. But that's just me guessing as to what it is. Anyways, then whatever it is, one plant sends out a chemical signature. It has to wave through the air. It has to go through channels. Then it gets in. Then that plant has to have a reaction amongst themselves. Action potentials come out here. This goes over there, and everything happens. And then a response that comes to that plant might come through something that gets sent through the roots that might have to pass through a fungi that then comes back to the plant. We don't see the closed loop. We don't actually know where the closed loop is. And so there, the plants are having a completely different scaled response that we might not yet be able to see. And I agree with Michelle's comments that I believe we have conditioning. Yes, the conditioning is not the conditioning that we're thinking about as in humans of like our negative conditioning or the conditioning that hurts us, but conditioning as in, hey, pollinators apply here, so I'm going to do this and I'm going to condition my response based on the pollinators. And then the pollinators come back and like respond to that. And there's this big give and take. I agree that this was ending on a high note. All right, so we did. Sensing is a far cry from sentience. Negative ghostwriter. We do not have sentience based on them. What if plants compute? Yeah, it's a mer. It's a probably not sentience, but I can't just say 100% no. Do plants have cognitive complexity for sentience? No, they don't believe that. Thank you, Mr. Soleil. Cognition is not evidence of sentience. Absolutely not. Mr. Tom Bennett believes that not only are plants not sentient, but no amount of anything that you can show me based on their cognitive behavior will ever prove to me that they are sentient. That is what he is saying. Then we have disentangling science from sentience, from developmental plasticity. Not exactly a no. It is I don't believe this is the right argument. I think you're looking at this all wrong. And opens the question to, if we looked at it in a different way, could we get a different response? So I'm going to give that as a meh. And then we have complex floral behavior of an angiosperm family as a definitive thumbs up. Not bad, folks. Not bad at all. I think that was a pretty good piece. So we are about 3/4 of the way through. We have actually, believe it or not, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 papers actually still left to go through. And SONC, so Segundo-Ortin and Paco Calvo, respond themselves. So we got a ways to go, folks. We still got some, but this is fast. I am still fascinated through all of this. I am learning not just so much, but I am helping me my own developmental plasticity to rethink things. But I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. What do you think? Remember to comment, remember to like, remember to subscribe, remember to share, invite others. I already have the next one, which will be next week. I've already got the scheduled stream so that you can already start to kind of like say that you're going to be coming. Please also go check out the podcast, which would be a wonderful, absolutely wonderful way for you to also explore what it is that we're doing and how all of this plant consciousness commentary work. And of course, there is the beautiful, which I always encourage you to come and visit, the Naturally Conscious community, because, that is the place. That is the place where we are having all of these kinds of conversations. But on that note, I'm going to leave you actually because I got to go. I got to head off to my my event. And so I am going to leave you with the outro because I actually have an outro. One day I will make this all beautiful and I will make it all really, really, really nice. That is not what I wanted to show you. I wanted to show you this.
Hey, Rocio. So this is a brand new project.
Wait, hold on.
This is my plant.
I stopped this because for whatever reason, it is just... that is not what I wanted to open. Where is our outro? Gosh, I am definitely not yet at the professional level with this. You can see it, can't you? You can see it. Please don't make fun of me because, I'm doing my best. I am absolutely doing my best. And one day I will get systems in place and I will make this all work and it will be beautiful and we will all love it. So on that note, let's go with this now. Why do you taking that away every time I hit the button? All right.
Thanks for tuning in to Plant Consciousness Commentary. To continue these conversations, join us in the Naturally Conscious community, your premier online ecosystem for plant reawakening and accelerated evolution and co-creation with others. Here you'll find expansive discussions, interactive courses, live events, and supportive group programs like the Plant Wisdom Book Club and the Sprouts Writing and Creativity Group, along with educational programs like Reconnect with the Plant Kingdom. Connect with minded individuals collaborating with plants to integrate these insights into life. That's it for me, Tigria Gardenia, and my plant collaborators. Until next time, resist the urge to hold back your emerging green brilliance. I'm out. Bye.
And on that note, bye.